we did it last year. That was the inventory. Will be inspired. Our guest here is Professor Kris. He's a professor and associate chair of graduate studies in the Department of ECE, Electrical and Computing Engineering, and he's the co-directing the Cryptographic Engineering Research Group. So I guess you can start while I'm setting fire.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having us, and I'm really thrilled to be having this conversation with you, Kris. You know, by the way, we want this to be interactive, right? So we're gonna chat. We're gonna chat for a little bit, but you should jump in with questions. And we'll definitely have time at the end for questions. But please, just jump in and engage. What we thought we'd talk about today, right, Kris, is this question about post-quantum cryptography. There's been a lot of talk, as you all know, about the threat, or you may know, the threat that quantum computing poses to classic cryptography. The idea that all of our secrets that have been encrypted for all this time, all of our banking transactions, you name it, are under significant risk as we reach a quantum computer capable of calculating at whatever the X number of qubits. Kris will tell us exactly where the threat is and where it comes from. But I thought, Kris, maybe we just started at sort of baseline principles, right? Oh, we even have a little fire, so we can gather around the fire. Thank you so much.
You got to share the screen.
What's that?
You got to share the screen.
With folks on Zoom, yeah.
That's what they know.
But I don't know if you know, but this fire almost certainly also comes with some fire pit music. So we're gonna keep the music out of the way. So Kris, let's start at baseline principles, right? Talk about how classic cryptography works and why quantum computing poses a threat to classic cryptography.
Right. So basically, two classes of cryptography. One secret.
Yeah.
That's the most algorithms such as the concentration standard. These algorithms are good for encrypting large amounts of data. So they are fast, they are secure, but they have this disadvantage that they require the same key to be shared by both parties. To all the elements involved. And for some to share the
This is an old concept of one-time hat.
So one-time has for example. But modern ciphers, standards, and what quantum computer asks these algorithms is only widely reduces the effective size. So it basically makes the size half of the original size. That's not a big deal, right? So you have previously algorithm 128, so you can increase the key size to 256, and you are good. You are resistant against people knew how to design ciphers with large keys for a long time, since early 1970s. And quantum computer is not really different, but this traditional ciphers, such as ciphers, you have the advantage that you need to somehow real a common key, and secondly, they don't allow you to generate digital signatures and have data. So with this other class of digital from public which are asymmetric, with different keys on the center side of the receiver side, and these can be attacked by quantum computers, and there is no easy defense against it. I cover them in place in the existing standards. And the reason for that is that if you increase the key size, also the time necessary to encrypt the encryption, increases the same way as the time necessary to break So the only solution in that case is to find a good class algorithm.
And the challenge with public key cryptography is the way that the algorithms work, and the fact they use factors, right? And the ability to factor large prime numbers, right, as the basis for the encryption, and the fact that quantum computers can do that calculation much faster than classical computers. Is that right?
Exactly. So the standard existing standards for public cryptography rely on fundamentally two major problems which are called factorization and calculation of the discrete logarithm. Factoring is easier to explain. You just take a large number, the product of two primes, and your task, to break the system is to express this integer as a product of two primes. So, so for a simple example, let's take, 21. Well, for small numbers, it's easy to see that it's 3 times 7, right? But when the numbers grow and become as big as, thousands of beats, that problem becomes very difficult for classical. However, already in 1994, Peter Shor from Bell Labs invented these algorithms that breaks schemes, class factorization in so-called polynomial time,
Right.
Short time, typically associated with just encryption, and then, interestingly, the second problem on which public key cryptos can rely on, the discrete logarithm, appeared to be very related to the factorization problem. So actually, Peter Shor invented the solution to the discrete logarithm problem a week earlier than the one for factoring. But factoring, it's so much easier to understand. So people, associate primarily with this discovery of the quantum algorithm for factoring. Yeah, but we discovered both, and this way, basically, theoretically, grow all public cryptographic schemes.
What year?
Theoretically, 1994.
So 94, Peter Shor creates within 2 weeks, solves the two major problems in public key cryptography,
Exactly.
essentially breaking those ciphers, right?
Yeah.
Except
there is no computer on which these algorithms can run.
you can't actually do the calculations needed to apply his algorithm at the time.
Yeah. So it's just a theoretical idea, but there's no computer on. It can be run.
Yeah.
None exists. And the first that come around, as Michael was showing, was 1998. It was consisting of 1 or 2 qubits,
Right.
potentially millions to break actual instantiation of the scheme based on factoring, such as RSA.
And now we're approaching the point in quantum computing that we might be getting, we're still a long ways away from millions of qubits, right? We're still in the dozens, right? Hundreds, maybe qubits in the near future.
Yes.
At what point do we get to the point where public key cryptography can legitimately be broken? What's the understood number of stable qubits you need in a computer to do this?
Well, so the estimations are that, since stable qubits may require hundreds of unstable.
Right, to error check.
So it's the prediction is it will be millions
Okay.
of difficult.
So we're along.
My esteemed scholars.
Yeah.
There is some difficulty hearing you because the
Okay.
microphone for this room is apparently this
Scoot
one.
closer to the microphone.
I was going to
If you
suggest
speak up.
that, yeah, maybe a little bit of both,
Okay.
I would think would be awesome. So if you don't mind,
Yeah.
that would be lovely. I think the
Alright.
way this is set up,
Scoot
that's
over.
the microphone there.
All right.
So let me get these tables out of your way.
I am really loud and I can get louder, so we'll bring the microphone closer to Chris. Is that all right? Cool. And let's, how does it sound now on the Zoom? It looks like it's frozen.
It's much better.
Much better. All right. We're gonna
Thanks,
try this.
Shona.
All right. Thanks for the advice. Sorry about that. So all right. So we were at the point where we were talking about the way in which quantum might be able to break. So, but it sounds like you're saying that we're still a long way away from this problem of actually breaking public key cryptography.
That's true. Because if you look at the practical realization of course algorithm,
Yeah.
they kind of stopped at the number of 21. And I'm not talking about 21 decimal digits, 21 beats. I'm talking about the actual number 21, which can be easily factored into 3 times 7. And that's what the largest number practically factored using the quantum computer. So kind of shows you that really far away. At the same time, the size of a quantum chip is growing. And the latest record, considering these chips that are reached to be suitable in the future to run first algorithm is 433 bits with IBM chip Osprey, released in fall 2022.
Osprey that.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. And then in the next year, they plan to cross the boundary of 1,000 bits, which is for Condor, and then into other.
So there's potential exponential growth, which could lead to a real risk to classic cryptography sooner than we might think based on where we are today on stable qubit numbers.
Since multiple countries are trying to reach that goal, including China, because of that, there is this risk that we are already collecting data. So it's responsible for harvest and decrypt. So you collect large amounts of encrypted data. Store them in some facilities, wait, another 15, 20 years until you will be able to break the ciphers and break this method.
Now, some of this problem might solve itself, at least for government classified documents, when 21-year-olds are just posting them on Discord, right? They don't need to worry about cryptography resistance there on the internet. All right, so we've got a very real problem. And so people have been trying to figure out what to do about this problem, not just about the stored data is what it is. It's encrypted the way it is, unless you re-encrypt it in a way that's quantum proof, and unless you maintain your new communication going forward in a quantum proof way, we're all in big trouble, at least for historical data. Okay, so talk to us about what this idea of post-quantum cryptography is. Like, if it's true that public key cryptography is relatively easily broken with a quantum computer, what techniques might you use to be quantum resistant?
So what post-quantum cryptography is trying to solve is to replace the existing public keys.
Primarily RSA.
RSA and
elliptic curve, right?
Right. With schemes that are based on different mathematical principles, but can be run using devices we all love, like smartphones, tablets, laptops, computers, classical chips. So the only difference is that we are getting away from these basic mathematical principles on which public cryptography was based in the past, and moving towards new classes of algorithms that are mathematically resistant against quantum computers, but rather on traditional.
Right. So we're going to leave behind the factoring approach. We're going to leave behind the discrete logarithm approach, and we're going to use some new algorithms that don't have the challenges or don't have the factors that make it easy. Factors that that make it easy to break with a quantum computer. So what are some of these? There's a series of classes of algorithms.
Right. So 5 major families. Having these algorithms are considered for standardization. Out of them, the most prominent are called
lattice-based. Yeah.
But the traditional one, the code-based, multivariate, symmetric-based, isogen-based. And all of them started from early 2000 as a potential candidates to replace RSA and
And who's deciding who wins? I mean, there's also somebody. Is there like an Oz behind the curtain deciding who wins?
It's an effort of the entire cryptography community. This decision is done, as a contest in the form of a contest. That process actually started with the quantum standard in the late 1990s. So for a previous contest that concerned different kinds of cryptography. So first was one for advanced encryption standard for secret cryptography and for hash function. And now there is this one for post-quantum cryptography. It started for good in 2016,
Okay.
and it's still ongoing. But we got to the stage where there are already 4 algorithms that were selected for near standardization.
And who selected these 4 algorithms?
Right, so the selection was made by the team from this National Institute of Fundamental Technology.
Yeah.
But based on the inputs from the entire cryptographic community.
Okay.
You know,
Including the US National Security Agency?
potential.
Potentially, right?
Yes, so no, it's not a secret that they evaluate these algorithms. And it's not coincidence that at the end of one of the rounds, round 3, they narrowed down the number of candidates to be.
Yeah.
Like a week after the announcement by this, was announcement by NSA that they support the particular class of these algorithms that was selected. We selected candidates on 5 family.
Yeah.
But NSA actually supported only 1 family, which is like.
And is there, I mean, there are obviously conspiracy theories about why NSA would do that. One conspiracy theory is those are easier for them to break. But the flip side of that is they use these same techniques to protect their own communications. So they're not gonna select something that's easy to break. So what about that tension?
So there are always no conspiracy theories, but the truth is that the security community, intelligence community, must rely more and more on the solutions that were developed in the commercial world.
Right.
And they have limited number of whatever they have a number of mathematicians, maybe thousands, but the
Right.
entire community of the world that developed standards and help needs. So these processes of needs can be kind of compared to US Open.
Yeah.
Right? So it's coordinated by the US, but the contributions come from a brightest mind
Yeah.
from all over the world.
Right.
And that's why the reason why the NSA
Yeah.
tends to double check that, of
Yeah.
course. But they pretty much will go with that, and that's what they risk mistake.
And so now where are we at in this NIST post-quantum cryptography process? What are we down to?
We are down to 4 near-term standards.
Are they all lattice-based?
Three of them are lattice-based.
Okay.
One is based on even more conservative principle, on hash-based, hash-based. This one is also like this, good. And I say support doesn't just been considered kind of practical enough. So they like that is what was a short cheese.
Yeah.
Our goal was but out of these, one of the schemes called Kyber is used to exchange cryptography. And 3 others are used for signatures, signatures, out of which NSA supported only one of the 3 false crystals.
Yeah. It's interesting that they're using the term Kyber crystals and dilithium. Is there a connection here?
Yes, so crystals, Kyber crystals come from the same group.
Yeah.
I think notations star words.
Yes.
Another algorithm called Saber, lightsaber, sword, words, but so if you have fun making different algorithms, the competition was this kind of serious, this interesting forum with people argue about advantages of algorithm. But eventually, somebody needs to make a decision, and that's a mistake.
So when this makes a decision, they're going to decide on one for public key, one for digital signatures. Is that it? No. What are they? What is this deciding?
So besides, they decided that there should be multiple standards, so they don't want to put all eggs into the same basket.
Okay,
But so there always there are standards which are based on authorization, like I say.
Right.
This big algorithm, is a version of this big algorithm, and keep curve. There are always multiple public standards.
Right.
So since all of these are potentially vulnerable, they want to replace them. So I can up a group of standards, but based on this principles. And so far, that is have been paid the basis of NSA. But just behind with another group called code-based cryptography.
okay,
And interestingly enough, one representative of that family was known already in the late 1970s.
Really?
And since then, it was not broken.
and why have we not adopted that as our standard? What is the reason why we've known about this capability and it's not been implemented?
Yeah, because just was not as fast and as convenient to use as RSA and cryptography. And the major disadvantage of this is called cryptography. Invented in 1978
Yeah.
is very large.
Ah.
These keys, which are public keys,
Yeah.
because data, they are in the range of megabytes.
And so has computing power and data storage changed such that it makes those keys more usable, or are they still a challenge to use?
Yeah, still a challenge to use, especially if you get more and more small devices, internet, sensor, information. So, this can see the standardization of classic mechanisms.
Yeah.
It was in the final group, but they delayed. So right now, there are three additional code-based schemes kind of in the way. Pass to the next round.
Yeah.
We'll evaluate the potential one or two of them. Will be standardized in the future.
So now we talk about these things as being quantum resistant, right? And we talk about this as post-quantum encryption. Are we confident that these algorithms, kyber, crystal, dilithium, whatever else is coming in the code-based ones, that they're unbreakable?
I come to that as a belief, based on mathematical principle, but not really 100%. Now, the security of these things is not based on law of nature, it's just a different problem.
Right.
And actually, among these 5 families, 2 were broken during competition.
To the entire 5 families.
Yeah, so representatives of 2 out of
Yeah.
5 families were actually broken. Doesn't mean that all representatives of the family necessarily, but 2 specific were broken very late in the game, in the last round before now, so the 3rd round.
So they pressed through the 3rd round
Yes.
as successful candidates,
Yes.
and then were broken.
Yeah, one of them was broken, like less than a month after the announcement of 4, winners that will be standardized in the near future. So this the one that was broken was kind of considered for the 4th round.
Right.
Power consideration.
Wow.
Why it was broken? It was broken less than a month after the announcement in July 2022.
Yeah. So there's a possibility that what we implement today, let's say, so there's a discussion around adoption, right? When should we adopt post-quantum cryptography? How important is it to do now and get ahead of this problem that's coming in the future? There are folks who sort of have this theory that quantum computing is always 10 years away, right? And it'll continue to be 10 years away, and so we don't really need to worry about it today. Why is that the wrong theory?
No, I think it's a risky assumption. Also, so much investment. So we cannot be really sure. And anyway, it seems that the existing things have been around for quite some time. It might be a good time to replace them by something new. That's nobody looked at during the last 50 years, like the case of RSA. which was published in 1978. It has been a while. So people had this type. But interesting, these attacks against these other members of other families were not quantum attacks.
Yeah.
Right. So these are actual attacks that you can run on your PC. So that appears that are just not even post-quantum, and not even good classical schemes. They're just bad.
So I want to make sure I heard this right. So what you're saying is that we've got these post-quantum schemes. They're supposed to be quantum resistant. And one or more of them were broken fairly late in the game by classical computers. So they were not just bad post-quantum schemes, they were bad classical schemes.
All right.
Wow, that's obviously concerning. So talk to us about your role and George Mason's role, your team's role in this post-quantum cryptography world and the process that we've been in with NIST.
So our team was traditionally involved in evaluating candidates for new standards. And to participate in previous conferences, the result we were asked by NIST to look at new candidates from the point of view of their suitability for hardware implementation. So what we do, we try efficiently implement these schemes, and also develop the implementations that are resistant against special kind of attack called side channel attack that don't attack the algorithm itself, attack implementation.
Okay. So let me try to understand what the part of the work that you guys do. So you're looking at actual hardware implementation and to figure out whether they can be implemented efficiently. But you're also looking to either protect against or conduct side channel attacks.
Most can be on the side of protection.
Okay.
But
you got to know good one. You got to have good attacks. Okay.
Right.
And when you say that a side channel attack doesn't attack the algorithm itself, but attacks the implementation, say more about what that means in practical terms.
Yeah. So look at things time or power consumption, or electromagnetic radiation emanates from the cheat. That's performance complicated. And tries to figure out the secret.
So you're saying that you with certain implementations, you may be able to interpret or understand the secret key simply from things happening on the chip, the power consumption of the chip at relevant times, the electromagnetic radiation on the chip. That's how does that sounds crazy. Help us, can you give us a little more sort of flavor of how that works?
So the basic idea is to try to recover the key charm by charm, and make certain assumptions. How this charm of the key may affect the power consumption of the device. And so we try all possible values of the key and run the device, the charm of the key subject certain value, and try to correlate the power consumption between these different graphs, let's say 56 possible values of the chunk of the key, and the actual device, the power consumption of the device. And the best correlation wins. So now you recover 8 keys of the key. And we go to move to the next 8 keys of the key.
So you're essentially breaking down the problem into pieces, and then you're using brute force.
Well, not exactly.
No.
I just correlated. So I get the exact value, but yeah, brute force on small charms, which is not difficult to do. So we operate a small number of possible combinations.
So I do want to bring the audience in for questions, and I can't sort of see you guys down because I'm behind the. So let's go ahead and grab it. I see we've already got 3 questions. So right here.
So going back
Here, why don't you and I switch to your closer to the mic? There we go. All right.
So going back to the side channel attacks.
Yes.
If I remember correctly, and if I believe correctly, one of the side channel attacks is used to break the post-quantum keys. And it's literally just looking at the power output. And what it's saying is like if it's high, if we see like more power going in, we assume that's 1. If we see less power going in, that's 0. And they're basically recovering keys just like that. Right?
So that's the idea. We try so simple power analysis. So you have computations dependent, for example, on the secret key, and then you have one in the secret key, traditional RSA. But you perform multiplication. If you don't, you perform squaring. So squared multiplication can be different patterns that can distinguish. So it's kind of the same side channel attack. With countermeasures that can be introduced, the attacks becomes much more complicated. But some of them are still effective, especially if it's software implementation.
But so then if that's the case, then why is it that only one of the, like, only one or two of the final candidates are effective, but the other ones aren't? Because like it's
All candidates are affected. So basically, in terms of resistance to side channel attack, it's an equal game between the old standards and the new standards. So that's one of the risks of switching to new standards. The side channel attacks
Still.
work. So, and the difficulty is that with old standards, we had these years, the side channel attacks were discovered in mid-1990s. So we had like 25 years to figure out how to protect against them. But with new crypto systems, we have only, let's say, 10 years or 8 years.
So if that's the case, when you're talking to, people in the real world about how to implement this stuff, are you recommending full switch to PQC or PQE, or is it do a little bit of both because these might have flaws and well we haven't found yet?
Right. So I think until quite recently, the consensus was to do it right. So start from hybrid schemes where security depends on both. You need to break both post-quantum scheme and classical scheme to get access to the information. However, when the National Security Agency, the management of the national security systems started looking at that, they realized that the whole process of transition to QC will take us to 2045. And if we're going to do it twice, then we'll need to spend twice as much money to do that. As a result, they kind of abandoned the idea of hybrids. They decided they are moving right away to replace classical scheme with only post-quantum schemes.
NSA, a pretty conservative agency, not known for bold moves like that. That's a pretty bold.
Yes, it is, but it's these are billions of dollars potentially, and a long period of time. And they claim it just background security.
Let me get somebody else. Yeah. So somebody in the back, yeah. No, you're good. You're good. Not all good.
So for the side channel attacks, does that rely on having physical access to the machine doing the encryption or the decryption? Or is that something that you can actually be a listener on the line and make some inference about?
So many of them, those based on the power consumption, would rely on physical access. That the most efficient when we do that. Others like electromagnetic radiation can be separated by some distance.
You can do air gaps,
sort of some gap. And the other yet can be like those based on timing, can be done completely remote.
So okay, so maybe say more about the timing one because we didn't really talk about that. What does a side channel attack based on timing look like?
Yeah, so you basically try to also measure the exact execution time in response to multiple messages. So you kind of build the statistics how does the device or implementation a certain key site responds in terms of timing when encrypting multiple messages. Right? And then you try to build some correlation between that information whose timing and once again recover piece by piece.
Well, in the back, we'll right back. Yeah, in the back. You're good?
How was that?
All right, yeah, go ahead, please.
So, from what I'm hearing about a lot of these side channel attacks, it seems like like whether it comes to timing attacks or it comes to power analysis, it seems to me like these attacks tend to happen when there is an adversary that is possibly already inside your system, kind of snooping in your memory and snooping in your power usage. So, I guess my question would be possible ways to mitigate that. Like are there other cryptographic techniques to mitigate that, such as using trusted execution environments? It's not really cryptographic, but it is important. Or obfuscation schemes, or seeking zero proofs. Is there research going into doing that?
So there's a lot of research. How to measure X. Most of that converges into the idea of mask schemes that make the computations performed with some randomness. So both the execution time and the power consumption radiation is randomized when the computation is performed. Each time we perform a new computation, we actually will be performing computations on different data. So as a result, we cannot build the relation. So the problem with limiting access to these devices is that many devices that carry secret information, are those operating in the field, right? Like big groups of sensors, for example, Internet of Things devices, where the user maybe not supposed to have access to the gets physical access to these devices.
Any questions online?
As of yet, I just want to mention our chat, our online friends, we do welcome your questions. I'm sitting here monitoring to see when they come in. So right, I was going to ask a question actually related to national security and nimbleness of response. This may be more for you, Rich. So
I like being the question. I don't want to answer the question.
well, or maybe just perspective in general is that we've seen over the years there's definitely been a shift in the what NSF funds and how they think about things, more translational research and higher TRL level sort of things. But when we're dealing with a field like quantum, where there's not a straight path up the mountain to achieving the technology, and it's not even clear what the names of some of these technologies are going to be in some cases. How can the US ensure national security and economic security? What kind of funding portfolio mix can be developed to bring promising existing technologies to translation, fruition, commercial deployment, or maybe non-commercial, but government side deployment, while simultaneously also supporting the kind of exploration that's needed to avoid, I guess the term to avoid would be, or the term of what we want to avoid would be strategic surprise.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so how do we balance that as a nation? Because I know many of my fellow researchers see the NSF TIP Directorate, which has been created, as a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
But also, you start asking for things on a 5-year timeline. And I'm a materials scientist, so my stock line, which is probably wiring thin on people's ears, is I shoot lasers at rocks and I see what the rocks do. And sometimes they do quantum. So is there a logic behind the portfolio mix that we offer?
Well, I mean, look, this goes back to much larger questions about defense policy and the way and innovation policy in the United States, right? Like, I think that
just to take the heat off Kris.
right. Well, look, we've obviously allowed our basic technology funding to decay over time, and we've lost strategic advantage there to China writ large. I think the good news is the government, I think, is coming to an increasing realization of that, right? We've seen things like the CHIPS Act, as flawed as it may be, and as many problems it may have. I think it represents an understanding in the US government that we have to double down on domestic capability, which includes basic science research, right? Because remember, the CHIPS Act wasn't just, it began as just a CHIPS Act, but it became the Chips and Science Act and had a significant chunk of funding, including the creation of the NSF tip directorate and the like, and provided funding for it.
Yeah.
But a lot of the commitments made in the science part of Chips and Science are unfunded. They're authorizations, not appropriation. And and there's this old saying on Capitol Hill that authorizers, people who create the budget allocation, think they're gods, but appropriators who actually spend the money know they're gods, right? And so it doesn't matter that we've authorized all this money if nobody puts actual dollars on task. And so convincing though the government to spend in the current environment, right? We have a debt limit crisis about to happen, where the government's not ready to extend its debt limit. We may very well see a government shutdown. We may very well see a default on U.S. government debt, on unprecedented default. Those things would be catastrophic themselves economically. But in the long run, right, we've got to figure out how to invest in these capabilities. We've got to be willing. We're never going to compete with China on throwing humans at a problem, quantity, right? Or frankly, the nature of the public-private relationship in China. We're just never going to match that. We're never going to match the kind of spending and focus that a state-planned economy can have. But the upside to the U.S. economy, the U.S. approach, is that we innovate a lot more rapidly as a result of not having a state-planned economy, and we have to capture that innovation. But what is that? I'll stop here. But what that means for the government is, if you're really going to take a startup mentality, right? The government's talking about, we're going to have all these venture capital funding models. I'm a venture capitalist now at a venture capital firm in DC. The theory is, well, we'll just be more innovative. But the truth is, to be more innovative, you have to be willing to fail. You have to incentivize failure. You have to be willing to fail fast and fail often. The government, other than maybe the space program and in certain parts of the intelligence community, is very bad at incentivizing failure. In fact, it punishes failure constantly. And if we really want to have a startup-like approach, and we're going to invest tremendous amounts of money in basic science research and invest tremendous amounts of money in domestic capability, you've got to be willing to take that startup mentality to it. And the government just isn't there. That requires a fundamental rethinking of the approaches that we take in all of our programs of record across the Department of Defense, and a fundamental rethinking of our programs of record across the intelligence community. There's this old apocryphal story, and I really will stop here, about Bill Gates and the NRO, right? The National Reconnaissance Office, builds our spy satellites, right? And I don't know if this is just true or not, but the story is they gave Bill Gates, sort of king for a day access, let him see all the compartmented programs, all the little things we have on orbit, all the signals intelligence, all the imagery intelligence, EO, geospatial that we're collecting. And at the end of it, they said, well, so Mr. Gates, what did you think? He literally looks at them completely deadpan and says, dismantle in place. Like you're doing it all backwards. It's all too old, too chuggy. It's not going to work. And so, maybe we need a fundamental. Maybe we need a fundamental restructuring of the way we think about these problems in the IC and DoD.
I found this really. Sorry, I'm just going to talk. I haven't heard my own voice enough today. Something that's been very worrying is with the levels of inaction we see in government on these sorts of issues. It's almost like a willful choice of obsolescence as a nation. It's like willfully choosing to no longer be a leader in science and technology, and making an intentional choice to go backward, which is scary. And
if that's true, that's crazy.
Right?
It's crazy.
That's the perception sometimes I have. And so how can scientists and engineers get involved and make change?
I disagree. I hear you. Post-quantum cryptography. We have US Open.
Yeah.
So we, really created this competition. We run it. We decide what would be the new standards, and others will adopt it. They contribute. They give us the best ideas. But eventually, it's up to the US to make the decision which of these steps we are in of other countries in that respect, right? And China, their own competition, but very much they selected some two algorithms, and one of them was actually scientists onwards. And so they didn't get as much of the contributions from the cryptographic community as the US get because of the openness of our process. That's because we have US open and they have Chinese competition. So that only Chinese can understand. There are specifications are in Chinese. Nobody can understand them.
So I have some thoughts about science and engineering getting involved, but let's take this question and this thought here first, then I'll jump in.
Yeah, so I guess the question for you.
Yeah.
Also. So given that, like, I mean, obviously the Chinese are probably like intelligence, and they're probably storing on, so they're storing a lot of secrets,
Right.
And they are actively developing quantum computers. And I'm assuming they're probably making some progress, maybe not the we're making, but I guess like, so my question is, given the propensity of and the number of Chinese people in academia and in industry, sometimes we see the IP theft that's happening in industry and
Yeah. Billions of dollars.
are there any policies currently in place to limit access to to Chinese nationals? Are there any policies to limit the number of Chinese nationals are allowed to come over here?
I mean, look, it's very controversial, right? Because what you run into, particularly in academia, right? But what you run into is 2 or 3 major problems, right? One, there are concerns that we're behaving in a racist, right, or biased manner towards Chinese nationals, right? That's one big concern. Second, there's a freedom of academic ideas and sort of an academic freedom issue that takes place, particularly in universities, that people are concerned about, right? If you start limiting who you can share data with and who you can share information with by government diktat, right? And then third, there's and I'll just be candid, there's a monetary issue, right? Our universities, our institutions, they get a tremendous amount of money off of foreign students that come here and are educated here, including in particular from China, also the Middle East, but a lot from China, and that's a challenge. And so one of the things that the government's thinking actively about how to solve some of these challenges is, historically, our theory on how you ensure that innovation remains here, even though we provide the world's best education to the world's elites, is you incentivize them to stay, right? You have them build their companies, their businesses here, right? Instead of and invest and buy into the quote unquote American dream, right? Whatever that's become, right? And that's how you avoid a lot of the brain drain. It's how you avoid a lot of the secrets leaving and the like. Now, when you got to compare that with 2 problems, right? One, our immigration policy is a complete disaster zone, right? And the theory of actually solving our immigration problem today and incentivizing people to stay is a huge issue, and it's the one we need to solve, right? And I think there are people talking about it. Whether that actually happens or not is in politics. We'll see. But there is active conversation. Companies are actually supporting allowing more foreign nationals to stay in the United States after they finish their education, instead of immediately forcing them to go home and build amazing companies elsewhere, oftentimes with state money. And then the third piece is a real challenge for us is we know there is an active, dedicated effort by the Chinese Communist Party to send academics, students here to the United States, workers to the United States, to steal intellectual property and bring it back home. And so how you solve that problem, knowing that's happening, knowing that's an intentional, dedicated, resourced effort, right? With these other challenges of wanting to have academic freedom, wanting to have a robust intellectual environment, wanting not to be racist, right? And wanting to incentivize people to come and stay here and build in the US, these companies. This is a very difficult political and economic problem, and one that I don't think there's a sort of easy answer to. But it's what we're struggling with today. You see indictments happening now against Chinese nationals and Americans who are not, academics included, right? Who have not been transparent and not disclosed, required by law for federal grants, their involvement with Chinese government funded programs. And I mean, even on this campus, we historically had a Confucius Center, right? Chinese government funded, and you can debate what its purpose was, what the upside was or downside, but those happened, right? Now, I think we're starting to figure some of this out. But again, there's this very fine line between doing the right thing and it trending over into a bias against a group of people or people from a certain country alike. And that's why you see a very careful decision by a Republican majority in the House of Representatives not to call the Select Committee on China the Select Committee on China, but the Select Committee on the Actions of the Chinese Communist Party. That's a self-conscious, thought-out effort, right, to make this about the current government in China, and not about Chinese people writ large. But these problems are really hard to solve. I don't know that we have easy answers.
I mean, this is kind of tying into what I was trying to get at a little bit earlier, in the sense of like, it's across when you look at the funding discrepancy between us, and just let's focus on the area of quantum writ large. It's nearly 8 times funding discrepancy between in basic public sector money for research in quantum between us and the CCP, right? A factor of 8 is truly massive. And so this is what I'm thinking when I'm talking about willful obsolescence, and yes, we have a much stronger private sector than, because we actually get to have a private sector in the first place, right? So, and those numbers aren't calculated in there. And so this is what concerns me long term, is that like, if we don't increase the pot and we redirect the pot fully to TRL 6.2345 level research, and for those not familiar with TRL, that's technology readiness level, and we're talking about times to fruition. And so if we're just redirecting an already smaller pot away from the discovery stuff, does this put us in a situation where we are ripe for strategic studies?
Yes.
And that is a big concern for me. And so how can those of us on this call who are worried about that being an issue, how can we, we don't see that many, and this is a perception, not an informed opinion, but you don't see that many, PhD level scientists in congressional positions, right? You don't see them in office, like they're advisors, but how do we
You
make
probably count on one hand.
Huh?
You probably count the number of doctorates in Congress on one hand, and the vast majority that are there are probably political science and economics doctorates, not any hard science.
So what is the path? Is there a path by which academics can guide national policy?
Great, it's a great question. So one of the things that we did at the National Security Institute and here at the law school is for the last 3 years, and actually this year we're not doing it, but for the last 3 years, we've run what we call a Technologist Fellows Program, and we go across the country and recruit about 20 or 30 technologists, coders, data scientists, the like, right? Almost always out of the technology industry. We bring them to DC and we train them in how to talk policy, right? How to take, complex engineering ideas or engineering problems or mathematical problems or technical problems, and convey that in language that policymakers can understand. Essentially, not dumb it down, but convey it in the format and language, right? So PowerPoint slides, bullet points, right? Talking slides, right? Yeah. And we start. It's crazy because we start at literally, here's how your government works, right? Here's the 3 branches of government. And because everyone knows this growing up, right? But like when you're spend the bulk of your time not doing that, that tends to atrophy. And so we literally take them through a training program over the course of, a year, get them up to speed, and ultimately ending with a policy presentation to members of Congress and their staffs on an issue that they're interested in. So there are programs like that we run and that other organizations run, but they're not nearly large enough. They're not nearly capable enough. And if you watch any congressional hearing on technology on Capitol Hill, it's so cringy, right? You have these members of Congress trying to work their brains around these technical concepts, and they're like trying to get the CEO of Apple to fix their iPhone, and you're just like, that famous scene when the senator from Alaska talked about how you send his staff an internet, right? And then it got stuck in the tubes because tubes were clogged up. The tubes of the internet were clogged up. And his internet was stuck in the tubes. I mean,
there's this lovely show called The It Crowd.
Yeah. It's a European show, right?
We have the internet, and it's like a box with like a red flashing LED on it. She drops the box, and everybody freaks out. The room catches on fire and everything in it because they're like, "Oh, the internet was dropped."
Yeah. But it's critical that for those of you that are interested in this space, that are interested in the policy making, like you're here in DC, and nowadays with Zoom, you can influence forever, but you can actually influence this process. Like your knowledge base and capability and skill set is very much wanted and desired on Capitol Hill, right? And in the executive branch, right? We got to figure out how to bridge that gap, right? These translational grants and some of this stuff is important. But don't think your knowledge and skill set isn't wanted or desired, it is. It's just figure out how to communicate. It's like that scene in Office Space, right? Where like you gotta have that guy between the folks in the back room and the customer, right? You gotta have the guy who translates the data and the information. So yeah.
So there are programs at Mason then that even if we have, there's one thing that I think that a lot of, at least I mean the sciences, so a lot of our students are like, well, what can I do with that? Right. And so they may want to go to the tech industry, but they may also want to try to make an impact on things. And is that a viable path where you could imagine having somebody finishing up their PhD in chemistry or biology or whatever and interfacing with yours?
Absolutely. Come see us. We have a blog where we write policy articles all the time. We're always looking for students from the main campus to write on that blog and provide input at both the graduate and undergraduate level.
That would be fantastic.
And we even create a separate area on the blog for folks.
Yeah.
And we can partner them with policy folks to help them translate what they want to talk about into sort of policy writing.
I think that would be really exciting. I mean, if we start having more people in the government who are scientifically informed, then we start making our decisions as a nation based on scientific guidance.
And to be fair, I mean, look, at places like the NSA, right, the intelligence community, I mean, there are tons of PhDs running around all over the place, right?
Yeah,
Like, and hard science PhDs, right? Yeah, CIA, DSNT is full of hard science PhDs.
I'll get off my soapbox and go back behind the monitor now.
So this has been a fascinating conversation. I did want to bring it back to cryptography.
Oh, yes.
So we've been talking, I think, a lot about how quantum computing can be used to attack the cryptography on classical devices, which is super important because I think for the extended future, most of our devices are going to still be classical. But what about quantum cryptography? What about quantum key exchange? What about like using entangled bits in order to communicate effectively across distance and being able to like know I'm Alice and I'm Bob and Eve is not here, or what is it, Mallory is not impacting my data? Like, where do you stand on that sort of thing?
So that's a good. So the first thing, obviously it's a separate question. Quantum computing, so right inside with quantum cryptography is for exchange. The field is relatively mature. The idea was born like early 1970s. Then there was this famous scheme by Charles Bennett and Jill Hart, BB-84. Then its implementation, came in late 1980s. So a decade before. But where do we stand now? The problem is that quantum cryptography does not solve the fundamental issue of authentication. So from the security point of view, it allows us to exchange the key, but only under the assumption that we have as a part of the protocol another part of the communication over a classical channel where we need to know, the receiver needs to know who sent the data. So they need to know that it's not a man in the middle attack, that is legitimate user on the other side. So that's the major difficulty. There's no authentication provided by quantum key distributions. And as a result, we still need to share the key. So how do we start the process? If we start this, that at least exchange the large amount of random data we can use for one time. The second issue is just practicality. The engineering aspect. The fact that the communication would only happen using special devices on both sides, then that we need to be able basically to communicate over the fiber channel, fiber optics channel, usually that needs to be rented for the purpose, and then or over the free space. Right, so there is a problem of technical use. It's not really such a nice replacement for post-quantum cryptography, nicely working software on any existing devices. Here you need to have additional device, right, that you add to your current computation channel in those computation devices. So there are problems with there are no standards. So there are companies that sell products, and the devices of these companies communicate with each other. I don't think so, because there are no standards in this area, and there are no validation from so all implementations of cryptography, it will be classical or future post-quantum, will have to be validated. So there will be labs that will be confirming that even implementation confirms with the standard. Nothing like that exists for quantum cryptography, unfortunately. And then, in terms of security, also, attacks against practical implementations, because, in principle, you transmit a single photon of light, but in reality, you may be transmitting a couple of them, plain strip, and then we can separate them. Perform the attack like that. So as a result, the current situations at NSA have strongly suggest that we are comments against using quantum cryptography in national security systems in the future. There's no work, as far as I know, in this standardized quantum cryptography. So as a result, everything shifts, maybe 15, 20 years away, and depends pretty much on success of post-quantum cryptography. If these are broken, then we have this rescue potentially, which is much more expensive and much more complicated to implement in the form of quantum cryptography. But unfortunately, it's not in the near future. It's not in the cards for the next 15 years because everybody right now focuses on post-quantum cryptography.
So that's similar to where we were before, where we came up with like RSA encryption, knowing that like the lattice-based might be better, but also more expensive and not as practical at that time. Similarly, maybe in the future, it might become practical, but for now, there's
Right.
overwhelming
So
reasons not.
flat RSA by that is much more straightforward. It's much plug and play, and not even large differences in size. So pretty much take a new algorithm, replace all, and you can run on the same kind of devices as to run RSA. The same, unfortunately, does not solve quantum cryptography.
At this point, I'd like to continue a little bit more, but I was going to suggest we do have lunch. I hope, right? Yeah, we do have lunch available in another room, and we're technically into overtime, so we can continue this conversation next door. If you all are ready.
Why don't we do one last question, then we wrap it. One last question.
Right. So with the prominent rise in machine learning, especially in the last year, I'm wondering if there's any applications to PQC in particular, society whether there's research going into this. What are your thoughts?
Very good question. So first of all, one potential individual attack would be to try really attack algorithm, and then that seems to be going nowhere. So machine learning is not very good at attacking, let's say, lattice-based schemes or rule-based schemes as algorithms. In terms of side channel attacks, there's much more promise because machine learning was used to mount successful attacks already at the secret side. Possibly, but this was extended in some cases to classical public key cryptography. So there's definitely a potential of using machine learning to side channel attacks to make the side channel attacks more effective. And that complicates our task as those who design countermeasures side channel attacks. So we'll need to take machine learning into account. It's a very powerful tool for finding correlations.
All right, so we'll wrap up and we'll go get some food next door and talk some more. But thanks, Chris, and join me. Thank you, Chris, for